Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's PENTalk. If you have any questions during the presentation, please submit them through the question box. We'll answer as many questions at the end as time allows. If we don't get to your question today, we will follow up with you afterwards. Tomorrow, you will receive an email with a link to replay today's broadcast. Let's get started. Hosting today is Dave Bear, National Director of TPA Markets at Pentegra. Dave has over 30 years of experience in the financial services industry. His vast degree of knowledge and enjoyment for helping advisors expand their practices has made him the go-to expert for 316 fiduciary outsourcing and TPA services. Today, Dave is going to provide an overview of plan design considerations that can help guide a business owner into choosing the right retirement plan. Dave, I will now hand things over to you.
Thank you, Lizzie. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. I think I'm going to have to update this slide. Not only is my hair now all white, but I am just now entering my 40th year in the retirement plan business. So over 30 years is still accurate, but closing in on 40 is probably a little more accurate. Today we're going to talk about plan design. So the what if scenario, if you will, business owners who either have a plan or want a plan and have never had a plan, they struggle to conceptualize how the plan will work. What will it look like? Who's going to get what in the plan? Very often, small business owners would like a plan that allows them to accumulate large contributions for themselves, maybe sometimes for family members. And they often want to control the amount of employer contribution allocated to their employees. And I think the best way to do that is to collect information and to create a plan design analysis for them. And so today what we're going to do is we're going to take a hypothetical census, and we're going to go through a case study, if you will. We're going to look at a SEP IRA, a simple IRA, a profit sharing plan, a tested 401k with an employer matching contribution, a tested 401k with an employer matching contribution and profit sharing, and then a safe harbor 401k, and then a safe harbor 401k with profit sharing and profit sharing and with cash balance. We're going to look at that as well. But this is the kind of thing that business owners often want to see. But interestingly enough, not just business owners. Earlier today, I had a chance to attend a call with a new 501c3 organization client of Pentegra, and they wanted to kind of have the same process here. They currently have a simple IRA. They wanted a qualified plan, and they don't really know how it works. They have no experience. So they wanted to see different ideas. And it was a fairly straightforward process for us to take their information and to create an analysis for them. So here's our census. You can see at the top, we have 3 owners. And then we have a bunch of non-highly compensated employees. If you're in the pension world, you understand the difference between highly compensated and non-highly compensated. And then at the very bottom, we have 2 highly compensated non-owners, or non-owner HCEs, as we're calling them here. And we have different levels of wages. Of course, this is a perfect world scenario, so we've created this census so that the numbers come out the way we want them to. We've got owners at $330,000 of wage. We've got our non-owner HCs at $150,000, and then we have various wages for our non-highly compensated employees. Total earnings $1,796,000. So what does a SEP IRA look like? A SEP plan. Remember that in a SEP plan, unless you're using a non-prototype SEP document, a non-prototype IRS SEP document, everybody gets the same contribution. Everybody gets the same benefit. So up to 25% of wage is what the employer can contribute. Here we've limited it to 20% of wage because that happens to be the annual additions limit for our owners. So if our owners are only going to benefit from 20%, we didn't want anybody else getting more than that. So we limited contributions to 20%. Now, in a non-standardized SEP document, if you happen to have one available, you can use different contribution formulas. You can use an integrated formula and still not have to worry about non-discrimination testing. An integrated formula using Social Security, those Social Security wage base as your integration point. But otherwise, there's really not much benefit between having a non-standardized SEP document and being able to do different formulas or different contribution formulas than doing so in a profit sharing plan. You're still going to have testing done. So at that point, you might as well adopt an ERISA plan. But here's what a SEP plan looks like. Everybody gets the same. In this case, I've tagged our 3 owners. You see the upper right-hand column, the P column, as principals. Principals doesn't mean anything from an ERISA perspective. It's not in this case. It is. It's used in this software so that I can distinguish between how much the 3 owners receive versus how much everybody else receives. And in this case, you can see that the owners collectively get $198,000 of the total contribution of $359,200. The non-principals or everybody else get $161,200. So roughly 55% of the employer contribution stays with the owners. 44 and change, 45%, if you will, goes to the non-owners. So now let's look at a simple IRA plan, because maybe this employer says, well, I think everybody should have to contribute a little bit, or maybe they already have a simple plan and they want to look at a 401k plan. But here's our simple plan example. So now we've got smaller numbers. Our owners are deferring $15,500. They're getting a $9,900 match. They're utilizing the catch-up provision of $3,500. We've got some other employees contributing maximum and getting the catch-up as well, and getting as much match as they can based on their wage. All pretty normal stuff here. We've got arbitrary deferral amounts here. Not everybody is maxing out. Some people are exceeding over the maximum limit. In total, we have $147,990 in the way of total contributions. Total deferrals are $85,290. Our match is $48,700. Catch-up contributions are $14,000. Those don't really factor into the way we're analyzing this contribution set, which is, again, how much is the business contributing and how much are the owners benefiting from that versus everybody else. Now here you see things have shifted. We've got $105,700 of that matching contribution, and our principals, our 3 owners, are keeping 82% of it. Pretty big number. The rest of it being shared by the non-principals, 17.98% or $19,000 in total. So here's an example where, and this is not uncommon. This is a typical contribution allocation where people are deferring whatever they can afford or whatever they deem necessary. Owners are maxing out. Owners in this case are getting the majority of the employer matching contribution. So now let's jump back to an employer-only contribution. So here's a profit-sharing allocation, and this is using new comparability. So this compared to that SEP allocation a few minutes ago. In the SEP, you remember we had a total contribution of $359,200. Our owners were getting $198,000. and everybody else was getting 161,200. So it was roughly 50+% to the owners and 40-something% to everybody else. Now, because we're using a new comparability allocation, now we're able to dial down our other employees. Notice that they're getting 5%. We're giving everybody a flat 5%. Now, down here at the bottom, we've decided not to give our highly compensated non-owners anything. Maybe they have bonus programs outside of the plan or something like that, but they're not getting any contribution to the retirement plan. That's just fine. But because they are highly compensated employees, we can discriminate against them. So in this example, we're giving everybody else a minimum gateway contribution to pass testing. Our owners are getting 20%. That's $66,000. And so here again, now we've shifted things dramatically, and we've still got that 198,000 going to our owners. But now look at how much our employees are receiving. Now our employees are receiving 23,500. Only 11.33% of the employer contribution is being allocated to employees. Now, if you're not familiar with new comparability, non-discrimination testing on employer contributions can either be performed on a current contribution basis, which means that everybody has to get the same, or the same within certain parameters if we're using, say, again, an integrated formula. Or we can test it on a future benefits basis, which means we're taking a current contribution, we're projecting it into the future to normal retirement age using a hypothetical earnings rate, and we're testing equivalent benefits at normal retirement age. So in this example, if you remember, we've got owners in their 50s, so they have only a certain, in this case, 14 years to retirement and on down. And then we've got some non-owners here. We've got a 60-year-old, but we've got a 31-year-old. We've got a 27-year-old. We've got a 30-year-old. So we've got some younger, non-highly compensated employees. Because we've zeroed out our two highly compensated non-owners, they don't factor into this. They're 43 and 58 respectively, but that doesn't matter. So what we're doing is we've got an average age here that's quite a bit lower than the ages of our owners, and therefore we're able to allocate a lot less money to those non-owner, non-highly compensated employees. And that's what new comparability is all about. It's not discriminatory because we're using average ages, and on average, those average younger employees have more years to retirement than our owners, and therefore we can dial down that total contribution. So now I'm jumping backwards. I've done that a bit here, but there's a method to my madness. Now we're looking at a tested match 401k plan, because this is where a lot of your folks might be. They might have simple plans today, or they might have a tested 401k plan, or you might go to them and say, let's talk about Safe Harbor. Safe Harbor has a mandatory contribution. They might say, I don't know that I can, commit to a mandatory Safe Harbor contribution. Let's see what happens. Let's get the 401k plan up and running. Let's get people enrolled and see what happens. So here, in this example, we've got various deferral rates. Our owner's at 6.82. We've got a non-owner here at 2%, a 6%, a 5%, and so on. Here's somebody contributing a bunch, 45%. That's our 60-year-old non-highly compensated employee who is concerned about saving for retirement, and so on. And we've got our non-owner highly compensated employees down here deferring modest amounts, right? We've got a match contribution here of 50 cents on the dollar up to 6%. So we've got our owners are getting 3%, a few other people are getting 3%, and everybody else is getting a smaller amount respectively because based on their deferrals in their wages. We do still have catch-up contributions. We're not matching catch-up in this particular example. So we've got $39,900. Now in this example, where it says employer costs, we've actually got the deferrals added in there. So if you think about it, in this example, we're showing an owner that, hey, your deferrals are really a cost to you and you are the owner. So we've added that in this example. Why? Because it's going to make our percentages look better. And here they are. So here again, we've got 90% going to the owners, and we've got just under 10% going to the not only highly compensated employees, but look at our testing. So again, this is a tested 401k. We talk about safe harbor all the time, folks, don't we? We talk about it and we say, gosh, we almost sometimes feel like we should default a business owner to safe harbor, but it isn't always necessary. In this example, we're passing all of our testing, and we've got a match, and we've got our catch-up, and we're passing all of our testing. Our non-discrimination testing, ADP, ACP tests are passing. So all is good there. So now let's take that match plan, that tested match plan. Let's add profit sharing into it. And let's get our owners up to the maximum. And let's see what happens here. So the thing to keep in mind is that, and this is where we get the very popular use of a safe harbor non-elective contribution, that 3% that we'll show you in a minute. This particular one, it also passes testing, but the idea here is that we've got our deferrals, our match, our profit sharing, which now has to be tested. And here, I don't know if you remember a few minutes ago, let me scroll backwards. In this profit sharing example, we had a 20% allocation here, and we had a 5% gateway allocation here. And now, lo and behold, in this particular example, we're passing our non-discrimination testing with a smaller with smaller numbers here. Why? Because we've dropped from a 20% profit sharing to a 10.8% profit sharing. The 1/3 test didn't work, so we were at a 5% to 20% minimum, the 5% minimum gateway. Here, we're able to pass it with roughly a 1/3 gateway test, and now we've got our owners up to 73.5 in total contribution. And where are we with everybody else? Well, now we're at 12.9% for everybody else, or 30,319. So again, a pretty big spread here of disparity. And notice our breakdown. We've got well, let's start with deferrals. So we've got our 401k deferrals taking up almost half of the total contribution. And then we've got our match, and then we've got our catch up, and now we've got our profit sharing at 117,973. So here again, we don't always have to jump to a safe harbor allocation to pass everything. It kind of depends. And there's a benefit to this type of analysis before the plan is set up, giving the employer a little more flexibility. They might, in fact, be able to dial the match even a little bit more if they wanted to. Here, they have a maximum percentage of 3.7. They have an actual percentage 2.16. So they could, in fact, dial the match up slightly if they wanted to, which would do what? Well, it would only benefit those who are contributing for themselves, and it would allow the employer to dial back the profit sharing a little bit. Doesn't mean that the employer, that the owners are going to get any less. They're still going to max out at 73.5. But it might mean that the profit sharing gets dialed back a little bit, which means our gateway gets dialed down a little bit, which might save the employer a little bit of money. So this is the type of back and forth what if analysis that helps determine how best we go forward. Now, testing doesn't always work. So what happens if we go safe harbor in this particular example? Well, it didn't change things very much. In fact, if you'll notice, I'll focus in on our profit sharing to our non-highly compensated employees. Here we're at 1.39. Here we're at 3.39. So we saved a couple of percentage points. But what did we do? Well, we shifted it over. We actually shifted it over to the 3% non-elective. So everything stayed roughly the same, but we no longer have the match contribution. So we have a safe harbor contribution here of 53.88. We have our profit sharing of 107.853, and our owners are still at 73.5. So here, we're roughly the same numbers, even though we've jumped from a tested 401k plan with a match to a safe harbor plan. So conclusion we could draw, it doesn't harm you, Mr. Employer, to go to safe harbor unless having that fixed mandatory safe harbor contribution for the year is potentially a problem. With that tested contribution, we know, let's go back to that for just a second. We know with the tested contribution, we can change things, right? We can change the match. If we have to stop the match, it's discretion. We can make it discretionary. We can stop it. Our profit sharing is more discretionary. So here, everything's discretionary, whereas back here, we have a fixed component. We have that 3% safe harbor, which has to be funded unless we pull it back mid-year and shift the plan back to a tested plan, which can be done if necessary. There's our totals again. Let's look at a quick tax summary. Checking my time. If there's a CPA in the crowd, I apologize. Don't take this literally. Don't anybody take this literally. I'm trying to convey an idea rather than tax advice. In fact, this is most decidedly not tax advice. This is a concept. So the concept is that we have an employer contribution of $161,733. Here I've taken the employee, the owner deferrals back out of the conversation. So we're strictly talking about the safe harbor contribution and the profit sharing. That's all we're talking about here. $161,733. In a 40% tax bracket, we would estimate that the owner is going to save $64,693 in taxes. Again, for any CPAs in the audience, I apologize. I know this isn't the whole story. I realize there are other factors at play, but the idea here is that an employer contribution provides a tax benefit. The tax benefit is typically the deduction, and in a 40% bracket, that might be a tax savings of $64,693, which means that if we take $161,733, deduct the estimated tax savings, we have a net cost after the estimated tax savings of $97,450. But remember, how much did our owners get out of that employer contribution? Well, they got $130,500 out of it. Between the safe harbor contribution and the profit sharing, they got $130,500. So the employer wrote a check for $161,733. They potentially receive a tax savings of $64,693, which means that $161,733 actually cost them $97,040, but they got to keep $130,500. That's 134% return on that net cost after estimated tax savings. That feels pretty good, right? That's kind of exciting. So our final example, we're adding in a cash balance plan. If you haven't heard any of our other PENTalks or any of my other sessions about cash balance plans are defined benefit plans that look more like a profit sharing plan in that employees are credited with an annual contribution based on a hypothetical benefit, and they're credited a hypothetical earnings rate. And in this example, we maxed everybody out. So we've got our owners getting $203,346 apiece. That's because we averaged their age in this example. We could have given our 54-year-old more than our 52-year-old, but what we did was we allocated a level amount because they're equal owners, so we did it that way. Still making 401k deferrals, still getting a smaller profit sharing. That's because that's limited by testing. Total contributions of $249,846. Now in this example, we've got our owners getting $749,528 in total contributions. Our cost to employees for their $132,860 is $79,570. That's an amazing number. 89%, almost 90% of our employer contribution in this example is staying with the owners. Let's look at that hypothetical tax example again. So now we've got that $739,098, savings of $295,639, net cost after the savings of $443,459. That's 148. But remember, our owners are keeping $659,528, 148.72% return on that money, or this negative number theoretically means that our owners are $216,000 ahead of the game by funding this plan. Pretty exciting when the numbers work out this way. They don't always work out this way, but this is the type of analysis that we perform every day, really, for potential plan adopters or for current adopters that want to see something different. This is the type of work that we do. Questions, Lizzie? Are there any in there just yet, or we're really about out of time? Maybe you should just answer them after the fact.
Yes, right now we currently don't have any questions, but if you guys think of any before the webinar ends, you can just submit them to the question box and we will get back to you individually after.
Okay. Thank you, Lizzie. Thank you, everybody, for joining. We appreciate it, and good hunting out there.
Thank you very much, everyone, for attending, and thank you, Dave. You will receive a link to play today's broadcast back in an email tomorrow, and everyone have a great rest of the afternoon.